Oklahoma is the land of second, third, and last chances. Who were the people that made it so? We'll trace the golden threads they've woven through Oklahoma history. The Red River Institute and Atwoods present Oklahoma Gold. I'm Gwen Faulconer-Lippert, along with award-winning author and Southern Nazarene University historian John J. Dwyer. We'll dig for the golden nuggets of Oklahoma history, here now on Oklahoma Gold. She was Oklahoma's first and America's second. Oklahoma Angel? Saint Kate? John J. Dwyer, continue with your story.
Well, Kate Barnard, as we talked about last week, maybe America's or Oklahoma's smallest person of leadership and inspiration, Kate Barnard, who died about 90 years ago now, all of 5 feet and 90 pounds, but giant of stature and the great shadow she's left for us in our history. Her father, John, rode in 2 Oklahoma land runs. He was a first-generation Irish immigrant, brought Kate to Oklahoma with him, and she developed a passion, what she felt was a mandate from God through her devout Catholic faith to help the people that were in need, the people who were overlooked and marginalized. And that led her, and we talked about this last week, which folks that didn't hear that can access it on the podcast on our johnjdwyer.com website, but that it carried her to election as Oklahoma, as you said, first statewide elected female and the second anywhere in America in 1907, the first election of Oklahoma statehood as Commissioner of Charities and Corrections, an office that was basically established to give her some office where she could lead. She got more votes for that office than the governor himself.
That's my favorite part. She got more votes, and women could not vote.
Yeah, 100% of those votes were male. Now, hopefully there were maybe a few women that kind of need them in the kneecap.
We are not going there.
Yeah, we won't go there. But so what'd she do when she got that office, Gwen? Well, how about, check this resume out. Child labor reform, and we're talking about taking children out of the coal mines where they weren't supposed to be and helping them get in school. How about, well, it was called compulsory school attendance, but maybe another way to look at it is how about the opportunity to go to school? In fact, the first year that she was in office, 85,000 children got the opportunity to go to school that never had before in Oklahoma. Those were just the ones they counted.
Well, and let's put that in perspective, because people had children to work on the farm, to work in the coal mine, to work. So she made it possible for children to go to school and not have to work all the time.
That's right. And I'm sure those of us that grow up in Oklahoma know that there's a heritage of sometimes at harvest time, the children, they'd knock off. Sometimes the schools would knock off for a couple of weeks. But I think the idea was, and a lot of these parents would say, I'm working in the coal mines to support you, but if all you ever do is work in the coal mines and you don't go to school, you and your children and your grandchildren are only going to be working in the coal mines. So she had a vision for raising people up to give them the opportunity. If they wanted to continue working in the coal mines, fine, but if they wanted to do something else, they'd have that opportunity. Speaking of children, how about establishing a juvenile court and reformatory system for young offenders? Wasn't there before Kate Barnard in Oklahoma. How about separate jails and prisons for little boys and little girls and big people? 15, 16-year-old boy who is in trouble be thrown in with hardened murderers and all sorts of other predators up to that point. They'd come out worse criminals than when they went in. She had a vision for separating them, and she did. How about orphanages, which Oklahoma did not have before? How about inspections of those mines, not just for the children, but the adults that were working down those mines? Institutions for the mentally and physically disabled, a place that they would actually be serviced and catered to and not shunted away. We take these things for granted now. Kate Barnard pioneered them in Oklahoma. How about just generally improved labor conditions? A corporation commission, which we all agree is an important set of offices in Oklahoma to regulate business and industry. Those that are doing it the way they should, well, they don't have anything to worry about. Those that aren't, they should have something to worry about. And Kate Barnard carried the torch to get our corporation commission established. And then hugely, and this is where, after our break here in a couple of minutes, we're going to go, where the most popular person in Oklahoma, as can happen, and probably some of you out there listening know this, if you're faithful to your calling, you follow God and not man where necessary, popularity may not be your guiding mark or your touchstone. And when Kate Barnard, in her second term, because she was easily elected to a second four-year term in 1911, she began to turn her attention, in fact, the attention of the nation, to orphaned Indian children who were being defrauded of their mineral and property rights by their court-appointed guardians. And you go, what are you talking about, John? Well, you'll remember that coming up to statehood, the tribal lands were split up and allotted, and land was given to each tribal member. And, of course, many of the children of those people inherited those. And what would happen is, sadly, as Angie DeBow, we mentioned her last week, wrote in her great landmark book, And Still the Waters Run, there would be people that would come in and take advantage of these children and give them virtually trinkets sometimes to sign a piece of paper deeding over their land. Well, Kate Barnard got all over that, and she went to war. But what she found as she did that was it wasn't just these unscrupulous speculators and hucksters that were taking advantage of the children. It went a lot higher than that. It went up a lot higher up the pipeline of the power in Oklahoma, I'm sad to say, including many of our elected leaders in that generation. So more about that in a moment. But finally, she paved the way for Oklahoma women to participate in social reforms such as these and others. Now, one of my favorite Kate Barnard stories, I think we've got just enough time before the break. Kate Barnard heard that the prisoners of Oklahoma that were being put in prisons in Kansas, because we had not had a chance yet to build our own prisons for our own criminals and lawbreakers, she heard that our prisoners were being abused in the Lansing prison in Kansas. She shows up on her own, unannounced, at this rough-hewn, they call it a hellhole of a prison, goes in there, and by force of 5 foot, 90-pound personality, gets her way in there. And I think after we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about this, because I'm going to read a little bit of a quote to tell you just what Kate Barnard found when she went into this prison in Kansas and basically went in there on a mission of mercy and rescue. Again, talk about the least of these. How about the people that have committed crimes and deservedly get put into incarceration because they've harmed others? But does that mean that they lose all rights of humanity? Well, they were up to that point our people who had made mistakes. Kate Barnard, alone among Oklahoma's leaders, had the moxie to go up there on her own and confront the warden of this hellhole of a Kansas prison.
John J. Dwyer will continue, stitching the past to Oklahoma's present. This is Oklahoma Gold. Some call her Saint Kate. Some call her Oklahoma's angel. I call her the first woman to be elected in Oklahoma, the second in America. We're talking about John J. Dwyer's personal hero on Oklahoma Gold.
Well, Gwen, we talked before the break about how Kate Barnard, all 5 foot 90 pounds of her, went up into one of the roughest prisons in the West, Lansing, Kansas, and confronted the warden and demanded to see the prisoners of Oklahoma that we were having to house in Kansas prisons up to that point because of the newness of the state and our financial difficulties. And here's what she found, and these are her own words, okay, Kate Barnard. I found a small 17-year-old boy from Oklahoma locked up in a black dungeon, shackled to a sprocket in the wall. Why? Because he was unable to extract from the inky depths of the coal mine 3 cars of coal in one day himself. He told me with tears in his eyes that he could not get out anymore, that the coal was so hard, and that he had never dug any coal before, and he didn't even know how to dig it. That was the dungeon. Well, how about the water hole? Kate Barnard again in her own journaling. Several prisoners complained of the water hole and the crib. Well, a coal-begrimed convict shot swiftly past me as I walked around the prison and silently, or almost silently, whispered, "See the water hole, girl, for God's sake, see the water hole." Well, the water hole was where they would dump prisoners in and practically drown them just to punish them. They would fill their nostrils and ears and mouth up in a small little compartment and to the point of drowning, and then they would pull them out. And then what about the crib? She heard about that too. What was the crib? According to Kate Barnard, the crib was a coffin-like structure constructed of slats about the size of a man. So picture yourself here in a coffin. And Kate Barnard said they would shackle the hands and feet of a man that they were upset with, mad about whatever, draw them in a knot at his back, and then throw him into this crib and lock the lid down, pinning him in this tiny coffin. Well, Kate Barnard went back and raised holy you-know-what in Oklahoma to the governor, Charles Haskell. The next thing you knew, there was a train load of Oklahoma marshals heading to Kansas with 5,000 portions of sandwiches and coffee to get our prisoners out of the Lansing prison in Kansas and transport them to McAlester, Oklahoma, where they built with their own hands. And by the way, there wasn't even a suggestion of escape. They were all so thankful to be out of the hellhole in Kansas. They built their own, the original Big Mac in McAlester, and Oklahoma began to house our own prisoners. And I want to, just in closing on that story, one of the prisoners in Kansas wrote a letter that he got smuggled out of the prison, and he asked, please deliver this to Kate Barnard wherever she is. And an excerpt from that, she said, already, ma'am, we have learned in the prison to call you not just jestingly, but reverently, our Kate, for your coming. And while it is yet borne no fruit but thorns, which soon the fruit came, it was to us as the sudden appearance of a lighthouse in a stormy sea, a rose in a desert waste.
We're stitching the past to the present. So that's how McAlester became our prison. How did her bronze get put in the state capitol? I mean, you can sit on a bench next to her.
Next time, folks, which I encourage you, especially after the construction is finished at the Capitol, get out there and see the great works of Oklahoma's history and art on those walls. But the greatest, in my opinion, is Kate Barnard, friend of the friendless, person who, in fact, here you go. We were talking a moment ago, why is she memorialized in a bronze statue on a bench just inside the east entrance of the Capitol? She wrote this herself. From August 1905 to the present time, 60 little boys under 17 years of age have been incarcerated in the Lansing, Kansas penitentiary, all from Oklahoma. Think of the Savior that took little children into his arms and blessed them. What would we answer if he were to return now to the Lansing penitentiary and ask us Oklahomans, what are my little ones doing here? Kate Barnard was the person that went in and got them out. She was always getting people out and lifting people up. But our golden nugget today is a poignant one, Gwen, because would you be surprised to know that illness of many sorts, she had a variety of illnesses that eventually took her life with heart disease. She died alone. There was not even a relative to make funeral arrangements for her. Somebody stepped forward and did that for her at her death in 1930. But in her last will and testament, she wrote these words, a prayer. And her prayer was, in her words, Kate Barnard, Oklahoma's good angel, that the youth of the world may emulate me in dedicating their own lives to securing justice for the poor of their generation, as I did for mine. 7 Oklahoma governors were her honorary pallbearers.
Now that's Oklahoma gold.